Senate Democrats unveil their own plan for fixing Georgia's failing schools. Governor Deal says he's open to some of their ideas. Senate Democratic Leader Steve Henson joins us live to talk about the proposal. A new poll suggests that Georgians may be more ready to pay a tax on transportation than legislators believe. We'll drill down on the numbers. All that, plus live reports from our team at the Capitol. Lawmakers starts right now. Good evening and welcome to Lawmakers. I'm Bill Nigut. We're at day 16 of this year's legislative session. Education and transportation are continuing to grab the spotlight. Let's get right to Pat St. Clair, who's downtown with tonight's Capitol Report. Pat?
Thank you, Bill. We're going to begin tonight once again with education. Today, Senate Democrats took Governor Deal up on his challenge to offer their own plan if they didn't like his proposal to take over failing schools. Senate Democrats dropped SB 124 this afternoon. It would create community schools through a grant program that not only provide an educational curriculum, but also offer a set group of services, such as child care, job training, mental and physical health services, and programs that involve the community and civic organizations. But Minority Whip Senator Vincent Fort says the governor's plan does not deal with issues created by poverty.
We have children who are being left behind even as we speak. We need to deal with these issues of student performance and the impact that poverty has on those students. That is what Senate Bill 124 is about.
Senate Democrats say their plan would be optional for failing schools. The schools would be allowed to apply for grants to provide needed services. School boards would retain local control, unlike the governor's plan, which calls for a state superintendent of schools. Asked about it today, Governor Deal said the Democrats' proposal is very general and broad.
But I do not think it takes the place of, nor is it an adequate substitute for what we're trying to do in the Opportunity School Districts. It's appropriate for the Education Reform Commission to look at their recommendations, and hopefully they will flesh it out with what they really think is appropriate there. But these are just operational things. They are not the kind of things that relate to governance. And we believe we have a governance problem as it relates to these failing schools in our state.
Last week, lawmakers heard from former school officials in Louisiana, where the state stepped in to rescue failing schools following Hurricane Katrina. Results there have been mixed. Senator Nan Orrock suggested the governor's close ties to Louisiana's Governor Bobby Jindal could be, in part, why he wants to adopt Louisiana's school reform model.
Some see this as a Bobby Jindal for President initiative. That the Governor Jindal came from Louisiana over here with his bill of sale to this governor. This governor started embracing it in the midst of the election. There was enormous pushback. Now we see post-election Governor Deal moving forward with Governor Bobby Jindal's approach, which our numbers show us it really bears close scrutiny.
Democrats in the House have so far been pretty quiet about the Senate Democrats' plan. And Bill, as you know, House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams told you she will travel to New Orleans with a delegation organized by the governor in order to look at Louisiana's program to rescue its failing schools. There was more good news for Georgia's economy. Corporate expansion is bringing 300 more jobs to the state. Governor Deal made the announcement today, along with officials from Comcast. The cable provider is relocating its regional headquarters to Peachtree Corners in Gwinnett County.
150 of those jobs will be created with its regional headquarters expansion in Gwinnett County, and another 150 jobs will be created with an expansion of the company's Technology Support Service Center in Fulton County. Comcast will also be investing in technology upgrades to house a new data center, which will support the growth of Comcast's newest cloud-based services.
Comcast is one of Georgia's largest employers with some 4,000 workers. The governor's office says Comcast spends over $200 million a year in Georgia, operating nearly 190 facilities, offices, and call centers throughout the state. That's it from the Capitol tonight. Bill, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Pat. Appreciate the reporting. We're going to dig in now on the Democrats' plan to address failing schools in Georgia. Tonight, we have with us Jim Galloway, the longtime political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. You can read him every day at the AJC Political Insider blog. Senator Steve Henson, leader of the Senate Democratic Caucus, and Kristina Torres. She, too, is part of the AJC's Capitol reporting team. She covers the state Senate and more broadly politics for the AJC. So let's get this thing kicked off. Steve Henson, thank you for being here, Senator. We appreciate your joining us tonight. You unveiled a plan for what you talk about as community schools. Mm-hmm. Why do you find your plan, in its broadest strokes, more palatable and potentially more successful than what the governor's proposing?
Well, first of all, you just look at the track record. The governor's talking about constitutional change. That's something that, you can't necessarily go back. It's a 2/3 vote. It's a important thing. It's a broad constitutional amendment that allows them to come back later with legislation and take over many more schools if they want to. It creates another bureaucracy, another department, and allows the governor to have power to appoint these superintendents over schools and control the school district. You might like the governor we've got today. You might not like the governor got 12 years from now and not like the plan in the future. Our plan has a much better proven track record. Cincinnati, Kentucky's been doing community schooling since 1990, and we just see a lot more success. If you look at Louisiana, you see a lot of variables, like a lot of federal money that came in, a lot of private money that came in, and you see that they spend a lot more per pupil than we do in Georgia.
Let me just follow up very briefly on Pat St. Clair's report and then get Jim and Kristina involved here. Senator Orrock, in her comments today, said she thinks that the governor is really doing this to boost Bobby Jindal's hopes to be a strong presidential candidate. Do you really think that's what he's doing? Is he looking at a model that he thinks might have some success?
Well, what I think happened is the governor had talked about this issue even in the election, but we didn't see the bill drop until just the other day. And in the middle of the session, you're trying to pass a constitutional amendment, and we've kind of asked, are you waiting till next year to do this? Because it won't go on the ballot till 16. We have time to look at all the facts and figures.
But do you think that he is trying to boost Bobby Jindal's hopes to be president?
Not personally, no.
Okay.
But what I think a lot of Democrats are saying is this about the money from charter school companies who have contributed to the governor? Is this about some other political agenda?
Okay.
Or is this about just trying to say you're doing something when you don't want to spend any money?
Yeah. Let's say number one, this is a governor who had lunch with Jeb Bush not 2 weeks ago, I think. So there's that. But I tell you, what we have are two parties coming at this from two diametrically opposed areas. We've got a top-down proposal by the governor. You're right; it would call for a constitutional amendment. But if he can hold all the Republicans in the Senate together, he's only 2 votes away. He's only got to peel off 2 of your votes to pass this thing. And I think he wants to drive this through as quickly as he can.
Remember, he's got 38 Republicans, so depending 1 or 2 peel off, he may need a couple of Democrats. But if the caucus locks down, for example, in GOP, they'd be okay. I mean, I think the interesting part is, number one, the timing. You've got a big transportation proposal out there that, in theory, needs to be passed. Everyone says it needs to be done. This is his signature, the governor's signature education proposal, but it's coming ahead of dealing with other education issues like the state's QBE formula, how they fund public schools across the state, which isn't going to get done until next year anyway. And y'all aren't talking about QBE funding, you're talking about getting private companies and finding grant money and maybe some federal money to do this, which is also a big sell.
But I will tell you, what I like about the Democratic plan is that it does recognize up front that failing schools are a community problem. Is it a problem? It's primarily a problem of poverty and broken families and broken neighborhoods.
Well, I think it's a false message to say you can bring in an administrator and just change the school around. There are a lot of factors with the school that needs to be addressed. The governor's putting no money with his plan. We've seen underfunding of education. Classroom sizes are up. More challenges for education. Our plan would go back and help address some of those needs for tutoring for children, for mentoring for children, counseling services, and allow the community to come together and actually see what the school needs.
The question becomes whether or not you've got House Democrats who are going to embrace your plan. On Political Rewind, our radio show last Friday afternoon, Stacey Abrams, of course, the Democratic leader in the House, said that she agrees with this concept that you've got to address poverty if you really want to save schools, and that's a big part of what you're saying. But you know full well that Stacey Abrams is taking a much more cautious approach and is saying, we're going to have to see whether the governor's plan works or not. You don't have her on your side at this point.
No, I believe, I work well with Stacey, and I'd probably be in her position there. This bill's starting in the Senate. We're having to address it now. The broadness of the constitutional amendment, the enabling legislation are all things that need to be discussed. And if there's changes to be made, she needs to have the flexibility to be at the table. And as you said, the Republicans had the votes to pass the constitutional amendment without any Democrats if they so choose.
Were you, either of you, how do you read the governor's rather open and sanguine comments about this Democratic plan? He said, I welcome, I'm eager for input from the Democrats on this, and there's no reason we couldn't incorporate some of what they're rolling out as our plan. How do you read his saying that?
I think what I heard him say now is a bit more tepid than what I think he told us the other day in terms of how they might embrace it, that they don't view it their way or the highway type thing. And then we've seen in the past they've been open to Democratic proposals on some, for example, the HOPE issues, but the question is whether, and I'm using sort of a catchphrase, whether they want to co-opt it or sort of embrace an idea. I mean, one of the issues that to me is very interesting is with his bill, they're talking about possibly going into a rural school system and replacing all the teachers of the school. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very interesting concept, given that it's hard to find teachers. And in a very rural community, you may not have anyone else to pull in.
Well, he wants to put our plan on the back burner because our plan has proven in other states to work, to increase graduation rates, testing scores of students, and he doesn't necessarily want that to be the debating factor out there when he's got his own plan and needs to pass this constitutional amendment. When more and more of the data we see in Louisiana shows that schools improve, but only after they change the grading system to make them improve, not because they actually improve, and other factors. So I think he just wants to put the emphasis on his plan. I wish we'd get him more engaged in this discussion.
Well, but let me ask this, because Jim Galloway, you point out that on Senator Henson's side of the Capitol, they only need to pick off 2 Democratic votes to pass the governor's plan.
They could pass it upright if they keep everybody.
Exactly.
They've got a margin, and they've already got Democrats who are wavering.
Okay.
And they have several Republicans that I think don't like the plan.
Right.
Now, whether or not they can get them all to vote for it is another issue. But a lot of people don't like.
Yeah, my point is they need to keep Democrats in the mix on the Senate side. But on the House side, where Stacey Abrams is being a little more cautious about this, isn't there a chance that the governor's remaining open to some aspects of this plan? Couldn't that help him pick off some votes over there if he can find some way to incorporate some of this?
And it wouldn't surprise me to find some of the Senate plan incorporated in on the House side. I think you're likely to see that.
But moving forward with community schooling doesn't take away my objections to the governor's plan, which it changes the Constitution in a broad way and allows really some variables in the future that we don't see necessarily improving Georgia's schools.
You're saying, at first as an individual member of the Senate, but then as a leader of your caucus, that even if the governor were to incorporate some of the elements of your plan that you really like, you would vote against his plan because of the way in which it changes the equation irrevocably.
I personally will vote against the governor's constitutional amendment because it has not been proven the recovery school districts to work or be a successful model. And because I do have concerns that we try to have these things that don't cost any money, bring in charter schools, which have not been seeing that much improvement in our schools. In fact, 2 charter schools are in the 141 schools he talks about taking over. we just haven't seen that yet. So I'd have to vote against it this year. I'm saying in the future I could look at it and maybe work on the enabling legislation, but our community school plan is ready to go, and it will help Georgia schools.
Okay.
Do you think he could garner more support, even among his own caucus, if he waited till next year?
I think that more information is a good thing in your Georgia General Assembly. You want to go home to your folks and explain why you did something. You don't want to vote on something and then find the numbers were cooked. So I think more time would help him in both parties.
Okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take a break, and we'll have a little more conversation about this plan that you've rolled out, and take on some other important issues. But in the meantime, from the Gold Dome to the Capitol and back, Georgia Congressman Sanford Bishop paid a visit to his old stomping grounds at the Georgia Senate today. He spoke about the need for state and federal lawmakers to work hand in hand on key issues. Let's listen.
But I was just very, very excited to hear the governor talk about the course of progress for promise and for prosperity. I just hope that together we can make that promise and prosperity available, that opportunity available for everybody in this state, regardless of the zip code that they may be in. I think about the condition of our country and of our people, and where we are looking at the big picture in the global, from the global perspective. Our competitors, China and India, they have 10 times the population that we have. They produce 10 times more scientists, technologists, engineers, mathematicians, and MBAs than we produce every single year. And so the challenges that the governor laid out for education, the challenges for transportation and infrastructure, for health care, for public safety, all of those things are so vitally important if we're going to maintain our place in the global arena. China has a plan, a 100-year marathon to be the dominant superpower in the world, economically and militarily. They have such a large population, and they're producing so many innovative technologists with whom our youngsters will have to compete. With our population being 1/10 of theirs, we cannot afford to lose any young person, black, white, urban, rural, anywhere in this country if we are going to adequately compete.
Congressman Sanford Bishop speaking to the state Senate today. Still ahead tonight on Lawmakers, a majority of Georgia voters say they'd pay more in gas tax to help the state fix its transportation problems. We'll be back with that and more as we go to a break. Hitting new heights with one of your Georgia lawmakers. Representative Bruce Williamson is a Republican from Monroe. He represents House District 115. Williamson tells us that he, along with, quote, some equally insane childhood friends, did alpine mountaineering for a few years. He successfully summited Mount Rainier, Gannett Peak, and others. But he says he was done in by severe altitude sickness while attempting a nearly 20,000-foot peak in Bolivia. Fortunately, it's only 237 feet to the top of the Gold Dome. Piece of cake. We're back with more Lawmakers in just a moment. As of February 2015, Georgia is one of 23 Republican state government trifectas, meaning the GOP holds the governorship, a majority in the state House, and a majority in the state Senate. And we use that tonight because we do not want Democratic Senator Steve Henson to appear overconfident on the show tonight. Welcome back to Lawmakers. It's good to report that the majority of your elected officials made it down to the Gold Dome today, despite the weather. Governor Deal took a few moments to breathe a sigh of relief. He says, yes, the state was ready for this blast of winter, all because of the tough lessons learned last year. Let's listen.
We've learned a lot of things. I think we have demonstrated that we have pretty well figured out what we need to do. Now, Does that mean we can always outsmart Mother Nature? Absolutely not. But I think we're in a much better position now than we've ever been in this state to be able to prepare for, react in advance of a situation developing, and then once it hits, to be able to facilitate movement as much as possible.
We're back to talk just a little bit more about the Democrats' education plan. Jim Galloway remains with us. Senator Steve Henson, Democratic leader in the Senate, and Kristina Torres are all here. Just very briefly, Senator Henson, your plan for community schools is about a $10 million plan. Is that right?
$10 million pilot program. The Institute for Educational Leadership recommends about $250,000 per school. Some states use up to $500,000 grant. So we feel that would definitely get enough schools in the program at $10 million.
Where do you get the money?
Well, you can get it from a number of sources. One thing, personally, I would consider taking some $8 million from the SSO. We increased its funding from $50 million to $58 million.
That's the pool of money that can be used to send students to private schools.
Correct. And some people are, talking about increasing that. So you could get 80% of the funds there and get the rest from revenue growth. You could find it, in several departments.
I think you were also mentioning you would take away the Delta tax credit, the aviation fuel.
Well, actually, might have thrown that out there, but whether it's Delta or not, we have several tax credits in Georgia that have not been evaluated, not to see if they've really done what they've been promised, and we certainly could reevaluate some of those tax breaks.
How do we think this compares with the cost of the governor's plan, Jim Galloway?
Well, I haven't seen a.
We don't really know, do we? Is the point?
Tag on this, and that's it. I would assume that it's going to cost at least $10 million.
Yeah.
Well, no,
you're talking about setting up a new school district, essentially.
Well, and to be fair, the governor's plan takes essentially tax money. It's the state tax money that follows a pupil and as I believe, local monies. And it's different. It's not going to outside entities.
He's taking 3% off the top of what's now being used in the schools.
Okay, let me very quickly, because we have very little time left. Let's move on to another story that caught our attention, I think all of our attention today. Let's talk about a new poll that shows that a majority of Georgians are willing to pay higher gas tax, or at least a plurality are willing to pay to help pay for transportation improvements. Jim Galloway, this poll was done by business leaders.
By the Georgia Transportation Alliance. It's kind of connected to the Georgia Chamber.
And what did they find?
Well, they found some courage for Republican lawmakers. That's the whole object. They went to a trusted Republican pollster. This is the same one that David Perdue used in his Senate campaign, and basically they found out that if you ask voters if they want to spend $1.5 billion to improve the state's transportation system, you get a majority vote saying yes, including among Republicans. If you start to ask how you want to pay for it, then the support starts to drop.
But you still have a plurality, correct?
You still have a plurality even among Republicans, and that's the important thing. You're trying to give Republican lawmakers the confidence to break away from the Grover Norquist faction. And you also have a question in there that says if your lawmaker votes for this gas tax, are you likely to vote against him in the next election? That's very important. And a majority of Republican voters polled said they'd give him a pass.
Yeah, that poll, you said it really well. This is a dose of courage for Republicans who might be reluctant to vote for this.
And Democrats too. Nobody, whether you're Democrat or Republican, likes raising taxes. And I think your numbers will show pretty similar numbers as far as Democrats and Republicans liking to pay more taxes. So it will give a little confidence, maybe move transportation funding forward.
So we do have another development that we ought to talk about for a few minutes, Kristina. We've been hearing an awful lot about the need to raise at least $1 billion.
Right. As a floor.
Right. But we now have seen the House plan, which says, we're going to use an excise tax. We're going to we won't go into the details of that. But the point is, it's now becoming clear that that Republican House proposal does not raise $1 billion,
It does not, certainly not in the first year. Our colleague Aaron Gould-Sheinin has a story up on AJC.com looking for the first time at what it will actually cost, and stems from a fiscal note, the fancy way we say that they figured out how much it's going to actually give them. And it's $871 million the first year. Now it'll keep climbing up, so by 2020 there'll be over $1 billion. But it's certainly not what they wanted necessarily. Now there are some caveats there. Number one, they haven't passed a bill. The House has not passed a bill. They're still working on ins and outs and how to make it better. Number two, they've been talking about, for example, the credit that those who own electric vehicles, alternative vehicles,
removing that $5,000 credit for buying it.
Exactly, and that'll give them a little more money because that's not included in the $871 million price tag. So, they're working on it. We expect a new version of the bill as soon as tomorrow, and it's going to be interesting to see how they keep tweaking.
With what they call a fiscal note. Explain. Fiscal note means here's the legislation, and here's what here's how we raise the money for it.
It's a much abused rule in the legislature that when you pass legislation and it's going to cost somebody some money, that you need to go to the Georgia State University budgeting office and let them take a look at it and see what the implications are. Usually it's done on the House side because they have the revenue.
They're the money
bills,
people.
But often it is one of these things that is skipped. But this time it's very important.
Well, we'll examine it closely to see exactly what it shows.
You could see some movement on the House Republican side to maybe bump up the gas tax, the gas tax hike.
Steve Henson, we've got just a couple minutes left, but I want to give you a chance to weigh in on this.
Well, there's still some concerns that they're taking some local funding to accomplish their goals. So they're, robbing Peter to pay Paul in some parts of this bill, and local governments will have to come back and raise taxes on their part, some of which in Republican areas or other areas aren't too happy with
Yes,
that.
and we've talked quite a bit about that, obviously, as people on both sides of the aisle really have. But your sense of learning that perhaps this plan, as it now is drawn, doesn't raise enough money to do the job.
That's a big concern. But going back to the well next year, the year after, is a hard thing to do. Also say this: I really would like to see a constitutional amendment where we could pay motor fuel tax for transit and other things. Right now it's limited road.
All right, listen, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Speaking of transportation, we all know you shouldn't drive under the influence or boat under the influence. One lawmaker thinks the operators of inflatable rafts and other handmade boats should be exempt from prosecution relating to the consumption of alcohol. In other words, floating under the influence.
Boating under the influence, as you're well aware, is a serious offense which can cost more than $10,000 in fine, the loss of one's driver's license, and possible loss of one's livelihood. I do not believe it prudent for anyone to become intoxicated and enter our waterways, but I submit to you that there is a significant difference between boating under the influence and floating under the influence. We already have laws that can be used to deal with someone floating in an inebriated condition, public drunk, disorderly conduct, failure to obey a lawful order among them. Fortunately, it does not happen often, but someone who has had only 3 beers and is floating in a lake or stream is guilty of boating under the influence. I believe this is a situation where the punishment does not fit the crime.
All right, there you go. Floating under the influence is fine. That's it for us tonight. Tomorrow we have Senator Renee Unterman coming in to talk with us about legislation that she is pushing hard. See you then.